This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicoast. Today is January 12th, 2023. I'm Scott DeLuneboom.
And I am not Ian Bushfield. I am Stewart Prest.
Stewart, thanks for joining us today and filling in for Ian on a little short notice. He's a little under the weather tonight.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. I hope Ian is on the mend soon, and I'm happy to step in the meantime.
So for today's show, we got a bit of a roundup on the little bit of news that has come out of BC politics in the early days of the year, plus apparently it's been a big week for defense spending in Canada, and we'll round out the show with a couple of takes on that. But first, got to thank our patrons who make the show possible and who are big reason why the patron Slack is such a lively and fun place to discuss politics and everything. And if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/Politicoast.
I can endorse the Patreon, the Slack channel. It is, if you want to stay on top of BC news, there isn't a better place to find out what's going on and to find out what different people are thinking about it. It's a lively place.
And with that, let's jump into the BC news from the week. So earlier today, Premier David Eby and Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon announced a new $500 million rental protection fund. This will allow nonprofits to buy older rental buildings and keep them affordable, basically, and try to move some of the current rental buildings that may be coming up for sale into the non-market sector. So follow on to a campaign pledge that David Eby had made, one of the few pledges from his leadership race.
That's right. I think this is an indication of what we can expect to continue to trickle out of this government over the succeeding months on housing, which is just a continual set of announcements, programs, and really throwing different things at the wall to see where there is additional value to be found. This isn't going to be transformative. It's not, the money just isn't significant enough to make this this change to have any tremendous effect on, say, the price of housing. But this may be a way to build a new program that can support additional affordable housing over the medium term if it turns out to be successful. But I think we are in something of a throw stuff at the walls phase, and to see is this another kind of partner that the government can provide additional funding to provide stable rental housing.
Yeah, $500 million doesn't buy all that many apartment buildings, particularly in a place like Vancouver, but it's a start. It's gonna have a marginal effect, and that effect's probably going to be positive, but doesn't really shift the needle all that much. And for that, it's going to be on the other policies that they'll hopefully be unveiling or following up on the legislation that has passed.
Yeah, and so again, I think we have seen other announcements where there is the potential to do more work, and then we have to wait and see the details. So this idea of a BC Builds program where they work with different agencies around the province to build new housing. This seems to be something of a piece with that, where the government is saying we can't do everything on our own, but perhaps we can incentivize other actors to fill in some of the gaps that we are seeing. And so I think we are just going to have to wait and see where other funding is announced, and if there are some really large dollar figures coming out to support building new housing as well. There's probably some need here to try to show that the government is listening to renters as a group, and to show that they're being heard. This concern of purpose-built rentals, or I guess purpose-maintained rentals in this case, being preserved being treasured in some form on the market. This is something that has been a long-standing complaint, and so at least the government can say they are doing something now, and perhaps this can be the seed for additional programs and additional funding in the future. One other thing worth noting here is that this is the face of government as we are going to know it on housing, and housing is the big issue, where we see David Eby and Ravi Kahlon working together, announcing together something. And so it's an interesting version of this 1-2 punch I think we're going to get quite used to over the next couple of years.
Yeah, David Eby certainly likes to be at all the press conferences, it seems like. I actually having trouble thinking of a big announcement from the government that he wasn't the one bringing out. Like this seems to be like a little more of a center office focused ministry than perhaps the one he just replaced.
Yeah, I think there's certainly something to that. We know that there's been a staffing up of the Premier's office, and we know that Mr. Eby has found a set of issues that he sees as his priorities. So I guess you could say to his credit, or the credit of the government at the moment, we know what they want to focus on. They want to focus on housing, trying to make housing more affordable. They want to focus on public safety. They want to focus on trying to address healthcare shortfalls. And so whenever those issues come up, we would expect, I guess, Mr. Eby to be there to really be putting his stamp on government as the new premier. But if he's there for everything all the time, that could become a little crowded for other ministers. It could also become a one-person show and lead to a dwindling of the kind of enthusiasm or diverse energy that you can get from a more team-based approach to cabinetry.
Indeed. And the only other thing I'll mention on this is, this is a case where they're trying to balance out the renters versus building out existing renters versus building out new housing. Curiously, that long-promised renters rebate still seems to be stuck in limbo, and it's no closer to coming through, even as the government seems to have no problem raising the homeowners grant year after year.
Oh, but maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the one-time renters grant. Maybe this 2023 is the year of the renter. We can wait and see.
I'm not holding my breath on that one.
Nor I. Not in the Lower Mainland.
Well, as you mentioned, one of the other priorities of David Eby is public safety, and the BC Prosecution Service has announced that they are going to be staffing up quite a bit as part of the government's Drive and Safer Communities Action Plan. So they announced they're going to be hiring up to 40 Crown Councils this year. Some of this is just filling existing turnover, and a bunch of it is to fill vacancies created by the dedication of prosecutors to the repeat offender response teams.
This is another area where I guess we could talk about that for housing, but this is an area where government is responsible and yet limited in the way in it can respond at the provincial level, trying to address the way in which the court approaches criminal prosecutions. That's a federal jurisdiction, and so the law is set by the federal government, and the overarching structure of courts is responsive to the federal government. But provinces create the surrounding the structures of the courts themselves. They also are responsible for managing the prosecutorial service of the province, and so here we see this is an area where the provincial government can have an influence on the conduct of criminal law in BC. And so by trying to staff up the prosecution service, trying to ensure that there is a dedicated set of prosecutors, both to respond to repeat violent offenders, but also to pick up that shortfall, they can at least say, we're not the ones responsible for any kind of delays in the system. We are providing the resources necessary to make these courts work as efficiently as we can for our part.
Yeah, and the court system has been rather famously backlogged for quite a while, and Even if there wasn't a repeat offender problem, staffing that up is probably a good thing by itself. Although, with the ongoing concerns, it provides some extra reason to do it. It is somewhat notable that this is kind of a change in direction from where the NDP was up until a couple months ago on this, and I don't know. I think it's a sign that they're still doing a fairly good job of trying to hew to the center and course correct when they need to, which looked like they may know that they were in danger of losing, but with some of this, the recent moves here does indicate some of the political savvy hasn't entirely left the NDP in Victoria, even though they are starting to get a bit of governmentitis in some other areas.
But I think you're right. I think there was a real concern in the wake of, if you want to date it from the municipal elections and looking at Ken Sim winning in Vancouver, and the thing people remember about him was the commitment to hire a bunch of police officers, and so that seems like it might be a message that can resonate with British Columbians, and if that proved to be so, that can spell a real problem for the NDP. They're not associated with law and order, with enforcement in the as their strength in public safety. Their strength lies with dealing with other aspects of issues in Vancouver cities and rural areas to do with the sort of the healthcare connected issues that we see in areas of the downtown east side and so on. And so I think they are really keen not to be outflanked as the party of law and order, and they're never going to win that debate. I don't think the British Columbians, if they're really keen to vote for the law and order party, are going to vote for the NDP, but they can at least neutralize that advantage a little bit and prevent Mr. Falcon from hammering on the government for being asleep at the switch when we have these sporadic but high profile acts of violence that we see in places like Vancouver and Victoria over the summer.
Yeah, it's a shield issue for them. If in the next election the debate is about public safety, they will probably lose. The benefit of doing stuff like this is it means the next election is much less likely to have that be the ballot box question and be the ongoing debate. So good move on their part. The system has been underfunded on some of this stuff for a while, and it's good they're not letting ideology get in the way of doing some pragmatic stuff on this.
Yeah, I mean, when people start to feel unsafe in their homes, and at a certain point that feeling is not connected simply with the actual overall absolute rate of violent incidents or criminal incidents in the province. If people stop feeling safe in their homes, that are in their neighborhoods and so on, that is going to take precedence over other concerns. It rises to the forefront, and so trying to be clear that they are attentive to those concerns is an important part of showing that you are a government that listens to the people, that responds to the people, even if enforcement is not going to be the solution to a lot of the problems that we see plaguing the province's cities when we're talking about issues that are often related to poverty, lack of access to healthcare, and lack of access to housing. These are all interconnected issues, and so to provide a long-term solution, it's going to require a broad-based set of policies. But this prevents it from becoming a political issue on the enforcement side.
Well, speaking of listening to what British Columbians think, Kevin Falcon apparently has been doing that when it comes to traffic on the North Shore, or at least that's what he'd trying to give the impression of. Earlier this week, he did a roundtable with a bunch of reporters. I believe it was moderated by Kirk LaPointe from Glacier, and took questions on adding a new crossing across the Vancouver Harbor to the North Shore. I mean, the third crossing thing has been an ongoing debate since the 60s. And this is the latest round of that. He said that crossing, referring to Second Narrows, is 60 years old, literally starting to fall apart. just went over it a week ago when a chunk of the bridge fell through and created a hole, which, taken out of context, kind of sounds like he punched a hole in it, but probably not what he was going for there, and not the case. But yeah, like I think a sign that they're fairly interested in winning back a couple of the North Shore ridings they've lost over the last 2 elections.
Yeah, and here we get into the debate: is a bridge going to solve traffic issues on the North Shore? I have to confess, I have to drive that route quite often to get up to Squamish, teaching at Quest University, and I am well aware of how bad that traffic is. I am also skeptical that a bridge is going to fix everything. The problem is that there are too many people trying to move around a single roadway, and as the population continues to grow, that is going to only continue. And I understand the need to want to try to promise something big and bold to fix it, but I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. Is this the sort of thing that is actually going to sway a lot of voters?
I think there's a decent chance of it. So, I remember back in the 2018 municipal elections when there was polling going around, and I honestly just not sure what the more recent polling from the last round is outside of Vancouver, but city of Vancouver proper. But like, I remember it was notable back then that those were basically the only areas in the entire metro region, the 3 North Shore municipalities, where transportation and gridlock beat housing as the top priority for voters. And the traffic doesn't seem to have gotten better in the 4 years since then. So I could see a pretty solid case why that would be still top of mind for the North Shore.
So that's the thing, is like I'm willing to grant I'm quite sympathetic to the idea that people living in the North Shore think about traffic more than anyone else, because the traffic is bad. It is not good on the North Shore, and it is never good. It is always bad unless you are commuting at, say, 5 a.m. or 10 p.m. or something like that. And outside those hours, you're going to be at a risk of a traffic jam at any moment. But I'm more interested whether the idea of, like, here's a big, bold project, we're going to build you a new bridge, is that actually going to convince people that they're the right party to deal with traffic issues? Is that all that people, is that going to solve the issue, is a question? And do people actually think it's going to solve the issue is another question.
I think people are probably going to be more convinced than not it's going to solve the issue. Whether or not it actually will is the bigger question, because a pretty robust finding is that when you add highway lanes, you don't actually decrease congestion, because induced demand basically means that people will drive more, because there's now easier ways to it's now easier to drive, and like it basically zeroes out on that. Now, some like the actual like bottleneck stuff, like on relieving some specific bottlenecks, you may be able to get more gains than a typical just expand the highway would.
You can, but I can, from personal experience, confirm that there are many bottlenecks in the North Shore. It is not just the one bridge. And so quite often what you can find is that you'll end up exposing another bottleneck along the way if you expand traffic at one bottleneck. And so I suspect there may be something of that effect. And having a bigger bridge would probably help to some extent. So you have this that merge at Main Street coming off onto the bridge deck, and you have the people coming down the cut, and so perhaps you can move people a little faster through that, but that's only going to address so many of the problems. There are other traffic jams that occur in the North Shore, and just as you say, you may just end up inducing more traffic as well.
Yeah, it's also interesting that that this contrasts with what the municipalities have been really pushing for, which is a crossing for a SkyTrain to the North Shore. That would require a new bridge. The studies on adding a couple rail tracks to the second Narrows is pretty conclusive that you really just would have to do so much upgrades to the bridge itself that it's not worth it. So they'll probably be getting a third bridge one way or the other, whether it's going to be one for cars, one for rail, or maybe even a combination of both. Going to be kind of up in the air, but that is kind of the other big way to address it. And the North Shore being more suburban is a little tougher to work around with a dedicated rail line, particularly for people coming in from Burnaby, Surrey, those parts of the region where it's too spread out to really funnel very effectively into a single line. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. There's definitely some technical and planning challenges around that, but it's an interesting look at where they are. And I think if they were to, the Liberals or BC United or whatever they'll be calling themselves when the election actually comes around, want to really kind of try and lock that in, they may be better off committing to doing both, since they're already going to have to build a bridge for one of them.
Yeah. And
that may be the savvier political way to go about it.
Yeah, and I don't know we're in a point where being the party of cars is going to win you a lot of seats in the urban areas of the province, and so being party of a building a new bridge for cars will please some, but it is not the slam dunk it once was. I don't think in the urban areas of the province where the Liberals or BC United need to make their gains. They need to be a party that really speaks to urban issues, that the way in which urban British Columbians themselves understand them. And so I'm not sure that I'm not sure that just becoming the party of a big bold project is going to win them the votes that they think. There is also this, I guess, more general political question, might be worth talking about for a second, which is it a good idea to become an opposition party known for some big promise? Like, if you elect us, we're going to do this big thing, this big, easy to remember thing. We're going to build a brand new bridge in the North Shore, and just promising a big new spending, a big, shiny, easy thing to remember. Does that speak to responding to unmet need? And does that help people remember the party, remember the promise? Or does it come across as being a little bit amateur is a strong word, but that idea of unseriousness, of saying we're just going to do the big things. We're not really going to be able to zero in on the hard work of government and talking about how are we going to do some of the more nuts and bolts issues. We're all about just the flash and the bang.
Well, there's a couple schools of thought when it comes to opposition of whether they should just basically try and keep their options open and basically be there so they can just respond to things during the election period if the governments are in the position to defeat themselves. And then there's we're going to try and make the proactive case for us. This would be a little more of the latter. But I really don't think voters are going to dive into the policy specifics, and I'm going to incrementally move along this very complicated socioeconomic problem that nobody has ever figured out the true solution to yet, is probably something that doesn't actually resonate with voters and doesn't stick in their mind. Whereas, hey, I'm going to hire 100 cops, or I'm going to build a bridge, is something that is tangible, easy to wrap your head around. You know what the outcome is. You know what the action items are going to be to get from here to there. And it's the sort of tangible promise that can work fairly well. I would point to the NDP's, hey, we're going to eliminate bridge tolls, as another example of a simple, easy to understand promise that worked way better than a complicated, well, actually, you have to understand that road pricing has effects on how road demand works, and that's going to kind of keep traffic volumes to a manageable level on key bridge. One of those is good political communication, and one of them is something us nerds like to talk about. And if they're trying to win, they should probably focus on the easy to remember, easy to grasp policy ideas, even if the nerds don't find it all that satisfying.
I think there can be something to this, but I think we tend to remember when it is successful. So if we go back to say Andrew Wilkinson's campaign, he promised to pause the PST. He promised to build the Massey Tunnel bridge replacement, and so he made these big bold promises as well, and it didn't work as well at all. And so I think it is there is something of alchemy there where it works when it works and it doesn't when it doesn't. So it has to be put together as part of a broader narrative, and if that narrative makes sense, I think the key here for Falcon is that he's talking about we're going to be the party of doing things, and he's trying to make the case that the NDP isn't doing things, and so he's trying to essentially capture that kind of business get stuff done kind of vibe as the spirit of his party. If this becomes a part of that, then it becomes part of a successful strategy. If it becomes more of I'm just going to promise the big shiny thing without any kind of larger vision attached to it, or it doesn't really necessarily make sense as part of a larger plan for the province, then I don't think it'll work out. So it could be a building block, and it could be it could just be a flash in the pan. So I think it can go either way.
Yeah, it needs to tap into something that voters are already feeling to be successful. The Andrew Wilkinson GST example, that was a case where, sure, I would like to save a couple percent when I buy stuff because I'm not paying BST, but it was not what anyone was really thinking about in the fall of 2020 was, are sales taxes impacting my budget too much? And it just missed the moment. Whereas bridge tolls or the 100 police officers tapped into a moment, and I don't know. It's hard to say exactly on this one, but I think there's a stronger case that this is going to tap into something, at least locally on the North Shore, than some of the other examples that the Liberals have tried over the past while. But who knows? Maybe housing is going to once again dominate things, which was kind of the other big thing he brought up. And in this case, it was honestly not all that different than what the government of the day is saying, beyond being a lot more critical of the government of the day. So Kevin Falcon's of the position that the lack of supply, the need for more housing to be built is a key part of getting a handle on the housing crisis, and that municipalities are a big part of the problem, and that a government under him would also establish targets for new housing and hold local governments accountable, which is not all that dissimilar from what the NDP is doing. So it's a sign of kind of an emerging housing consensus in BC.
There's, potential consensus that there's an issue. It is interesting that there's this endorsement of making local governments somehow pay up if they are not able to meet targets for housing. Like you say, that's basically endorsing the current government's approach, saying, well, but we were going to do what they're doing, only better. Which is less effective as a critique, even if it is a correct one. I think it is fascinating that everyone is agreeing that this is now the fault of local governments. That is a real change, and it is a little surprising too that Kevin Falcon didn't use the opportunity to sort of wrap himself up in the local government flag, the idea of accountability to the person on the street and the government that is closest to the people, and saying that he could have done that. He could have said that this approach by the NDP is eroding principles of local democracy, and instead saying, no, these local governments are absolutely dragging their heels and something's got to change. That is interesting to see. I'm sure there was a discussion about which way to go on that, and maybe local governments are just not that popular these days, and that's a possibility as well.
Yeah, so there's definitely an option for him to do that, and that's the very easy political thing to do, is take the opposite position of whatever the government is doing. I do wonder how much of this is influenced by his private sector experience. He was working for, I believe it was Anthem Properties before he returned to politics, and maybe actually having to deal with local governments was part of what pushed him towards seeing how they can be impediments to building housing. So this could be a case where life experience has informed him in a way that maybe makes it so he doesn't want to take the easy route on
That's
it.
right. Quietly saying this, David, you are right. The municipal governments are absolutely terrible on this, and something's got to change. One of those memes online on Twitter back in the days when we went on Twitter. I don't go on Twitter anymore, not very much, anyways. But people at the Oscars clapping and pointing and all that. And so, just an agreement that the excess regulation at the local level is a real impediment to maximizing and really meeting the market demand for housing in this province.
Yeah, I'll also point out, there's internally within the BC Liberals, there's been efforts by, I think, particularly the younger generation that maybe isn't necessarily reflected in the MLAs at this moment, but kind of the people who will be coming up after the current batch, to kind of make this more of an issue and also kind of settle on we really actually do need to get the NIMBYism of local governments dealt with, and those internal workings may be also making their way into what the leader is saying. So it's
anyone talking to anyone under the age of 30 or under the age of 40 or really any age trying to rent anywhere is going to know that things are not good. Things are in fact quite bad.
Yeah. So there's I know there's been some active work by kind of younger members of the party on this, which may be bearing fruit here as well. But I mostly just find this interesting in that we're very clearly settling on a single view within the province here, and that isn't necessarily the case everywhere, and maybe Ontario's can get there in a little bit, but they're not quite there yet with their politics. And I mean, part of that may just be how ham-fisted Ford is with everything, but I think we're kind of leading the pack, at least in Canada, on this one.
It is noteworthy. This is a significant development as well, in the particular sense that municipalities themselves, if they are displeased with the EB government's approach of putting in place some kind of a quota or expectation for development on municipalities and communicating a willingness to step in if cities don't do it themselves, there might have been an instinct to try to push back against the NDP, to try to play out the clock, to play for time, in the hopes that a future Liberal government would come to their aid and say, actually, you don't have to do that. Things are fine the way they are. But the Liberal government is saying, or the Liberal Party is saying, no, actually, we agree that this is on you. There's no incentive to play out the clock or to really push against it. The municipalities really do have to respond to this increased expectation, and so that is quietly a notable thing.
Yeah, and it's also good because one of my big concerns with the Housing Supply Act is it's very much dependent on the Minister for Housing and what they do and how active they are in really holding local government's feet to the fire on this. And it remains to be seen how the current one's going to handle that and how tough he's going to be. But it's a positive sign that a change in government isn't likely to ease up on that. But I'd still feel a little more comfortable if things were a little less dependent on the minister and a little more just kind of coded into the structure of the Housing Supply Act. But it's a start.
It is. And this is something we do know of this government. It does have a tendency to like to turn things over to the to the ministry, to the relevant minister or cabinet as a whole to make decisions, and so on a number of key issues, saying, well, we'll let them fill in the details and implement this as they see fit, and that can be quite good. It gives ministers a great deal of flexibility to respond to changing circumstances, but it can at times be a recipe for for not actually doing anything, such as with the debate regarding change to daylight savings time. If that's it's up to the minister.
That one's on Congress more than anything.
Right, but I mean, just the structure of the legislation is all I'm saying, is that the executive can change it when they want to change it, and they're not going to change it until Congress does.
And who knows when that's going to happen. But speaking of things that probably aren't actually going to happen, David Eby is under recall threat. So a petition was filed with Elections BC this week to start the recall of David Eby in Vancouver Point Grey, his riding. This was initiated by General Salvatore Vitro, who I was unaware of, but apparently was involved in the 2010 anti-HST referendum, as well as founded a fringe political party called BC First, which I know basically nothing about. But yeah, he started the process to get David Eby recalled. Under the rules, the recall canvassers now have to go out and collect signatures from 40% or more of eligible voters in the riding, which is 16,449 voters. They're going to have to get to agree to recall David Eby. On one hand, that is more than the 12,600 votes David Eby got last time, but also very far ahead of the 7,700 that the Liberals got in the 2020 election. And there's just no way anyone is going to be able to actually collect that many signatures against a reasonably popular politician like David Eby, or pretty much any politician for that matter, as these have never really gone anywhere, with one potential exception when in 1998 an MLA resigned after the signature threshold was met.
Or seemed to be on track to being met. And it was during the verification of signatures that I think Paul Reitzma saw the writing on the wall and decided to step out of the role as MLA, and I assume went on to do different things instead. In that case, there was seemingly good evidence that Mr. Reitzma was impersonating other people, writing to local newspapers, saying nice things about himself.
That's such a weird thing to go down over.
It is, and yet it's the sort of thing that lives on with sock puppet accounts on places like Twitter, and so
true. Yeah, I mean, I guess we did have was it Pierre Delecto?
Yeah,
whose real identity got exposed.
Yeah, these things. That
was Mitt Romney's, for anyone who was not aware of that particular thing.
There's nothing truly new in politics, but it is always changing the way it plays out, including sock puppet letters to newspapers.
Yeah. Anyway, this whole thing is apparently motivated by anti-vax sentiment and opposition to Bill 36, the Healthcare Professions and Occupations Act, and the ability in there for boards of the regulatory colleges to impose vaccine requirements on their members in the healthcare setting. It's a mess. It's silly. It's not going to go anywhere, but that seems to be the primary function of the recall legislation, is to let cranks get a news story in every once in a while.
It does, and it is interesting. There are some through lines that we do see. This idea that government is not working, that government is fundamentally corrupt and flawed. I think the proponents of the recall petition is arguing that Eby is a dictator. It's basically saying when governments are acting using the powers that they have been entrusted with, it is going too far, and that some concept of the real people need to rise up and stop it, whether that takes the form of a convoy to Ottawa, or in this case, a perfectly legal but certainly doomed to not succeed recall petition. We do see this attempt, this linkage of governments being not just wrong, but somehow requiring replacement being a through line in this sort of populist moment in not just Canadian politics but elsewhere. But this is the Canadian version of
it. Well, moving on to a couple news stories from outside of the province. It's been a big week for military spending in Canada, and that's something that rarely ever happens. So, start of this week, the government announced that they finalized the F-35 purchase for a $19 billion price tag. We'll be getting 85 F-35A jets that will start delivery in 2026. And the full complement will be delivered by 2032, replacing the CF-18s. Because we've been part of the program since it started in the late 90s, we get to pay the same cheaper cost that the US does. So each jet's going to cost about $85 million US, which is a decent chunk of change, but also down quite a bit from what the unit costs were a few years ago, and actually not all that much more expensive than what a generation 4.5 fighter would cost. So noteworthy on that respect. A lot of the our more math inclined listeners might note that doesn't multiplied out by 88 doesn't equal 19 billion, and the rest of that price tag is going to go for a lot of the other associated costs, new equipment to service the jets, new weapons to go with the jets, training. We have to build a new air fleet maintenance facility to service them. So a lot of kind of additional costs that are going to be coming into it over the next while. But yeah, the long discussed CF-18 replacement has crossed another milestone this week.
It is an issue truly decades in the making. We were talking about this under the Harper government, and the Trudeau government was elected in part on a promise not to pay for the F-35 fighter, and yet here we are getting CF-35 fighters. It is not just a defense story, it is a procurement defense story in Canada. And there is no more painful subject in Canadian politics, I dare say. And so the fact that something definitive is happening is worth celebrating in its own way. Every state of a size like Canada's is going to need some form of military capacity in order to act on the global stage, and so having operable fighter jets is something that the Canadian government had to take care of, and it really took quite a while to get there, but here we are now, and we can now turn our attention to other pressing procurement issues for the Canadian military.
Yeah, so this is important. I think people often underrate the importance of defense spending in Canada, and particularly timely replacement of equipment. Currently, we're flying the CF-18 jets. Those things are coming up on the end of their service life. You can only fly high-performance fighter aircraft so many times before the metal in the airframe starts to fatigue and crack, and it becomes unsafe to fly them. We've had a couple stopgaps. We have life cycle extension programs going on. We bought some Australian fighters that they were getting rid of to fill some gaps, but we're in a tough spot keeping our existing aircraft up in the air. It got announced earlier this year that we are going to be withdrawing the CF-18s we have in Romania that are contributing to the defense of our allies in Eastern Europe. And that's unfortunate. And we withdrawn them because we weren't able to maintain a presence to help bolster our allies while also undergoing the maintenance they need, keeping the training system going, and meeting our NORAD commitments here at home. And having these replaced and actually having a complement of new working fighters would do that well. And we use them. Like every now and then Russia likes to probe our northern airspace, and we send out our jets to intercept them, and that's something that feels more important than it used to be. And being able to do that routinely without having to worry about the planes and the pilots we're setting up to do that is going to be a good thing when they finally show up.
One of the arguments for having a robust military capacity in Canada, it's interesting, it's not a new argument, it's been around for a while, is that Canada needs to be able to defend its own sovereign territory, because that territory will be defended. The question is simply who's going to do the defending, and if Canada is not going to defend that airspace, then the United States will. So it is, in a sense, responding to... It is responding to the requirements of operating as a sovereign country at its most basic level, but beyond that, as you were mentioning, if we want Canada to be active on the international stage, to be a leader, that requires resources. That requires resources for development assistance. It requires resources for diplomacy. It requires resources for military procurement as well.
Yeah, and I think Canada's feeling a little better about our relationship with the States, but if we don't invest in these aircraft, there's a decent chance that, like a higher chance than I would like, that Trump could get reelected. And I don't know about you, but like I certainly don't want Donald Trump deciding which aircraft can and can't fly over Canada.
No, that seems...
I certainly don't want Putin deciding that. So, like, having our own ability to enforce our own sovereignty is very important.
Mm-hmm. And it is a less predictable world than it was in the 1990s. I think we can work, and it's important to work for ways to maintain a rule-governed world. But incidents like Ukraine and Syria make clear that at times that order breaks down. And as long as the global order is anarchical, there is no hierarchical power within the world. There's no global democracy. We're going to require force at times.
Indeed. Speaking of Ukraine, the other big defense spending news this week is that we're going to be purchasing surface-to-air missile systems and sending them to Ukraine. So the system we're acquiring is the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System that's produced by Raytheon and I believe a Norwegian company in partnership. So this is going to cost about $406 million. That comes out of the recently announced $500 million in aid for Ukraine, and also follows on to the U.S. government supplying a bunch of systems of the same type to Ukraine. Good. The weird thing about this whole thing is that we're buying surface-to-air missile systems, but we actually don't have any of our own. The Army has been without air defense capabilities for over 10 years now, when they got retired in 2012, and we haven't gotten around to replacing them yet. So it makes it a slightly weird purchase in that respect, and I don't know, hopefully if we're happy with how they're turning out, we can add a few more onto the order for our own use.
Yeah, it does underscore that needs differ, and when something really needs to happen, this government is capable of making things happen quickly. But on other issues where there are say distributional impacts or for acquiring a new military component where there are simple bureaucratic processes that are left unchecked by political imperatives, then these things can drag on for, as we just discussed, not only years but indeed decades. And so the need is different. Canada is not in imminent need of defending itself against a missile attacks, but this incident and this ongoing conflict in Ukraine with Russia's continued aerial pressure is a clear reminder that sometimes we do need this capacity, and in this case, when we need to get it quickly, we simply buy it from the Americans and send it on.
Yeah, and like these systems are definitely right now much better used in Ukraine's hands than ours. Every aircraft of the Russian Air Force they down is a good thing, and ultimately makes our allies more secure, and ourselves as a result. Nevertheless, like it is a noticeable gap, and like we have military personnel deployed in the Baltic, and currently they rely on our allies to provide them with cover should something unfortunate happen and a shooting war starts in the region. Ideally, our troops would be able to protect themselves and not necessarily have to rely on our allies for that. And hopefully we can get serious about this and scale that up, because when we do deploy overseas, we want to be able to ensure our troops are protected against the full range of threats. And particularly as drone warfare becomes an increasingly significant factor on the battlefield, anti-air capability is something that absolutely has to be a part of any military force. So yeah, good news story, but like definitely something to watch for in terms of where things go from there on that. Finally, story I want to flag where Trudeau had some thoughts this past week about what Alberta should be doing with its budget surplus. Specifically, he was wanting Alberta to spend their surplus to help bolster tax credits for scaling up carbon capture, storage, and emissions reduction technologies in Alberta. I mostly wanted to flag this because it seems unwise for Trudeau to be weighing in on the internal goings on within Alberta. Like, if he wants to see more tax credits go into that sector, they can add a item in the upcoming budget on that. But like, considering the political climate in Alberta, there's an election only a couple months away, and the narrative that Danielle Smith is like really hanging her hat on, it seems unwise to give that narrative legs by having someone from Ottawa, particularly him, go around saying what Alberta should be doing with their own budget.
Yeah, I think perhaps there's a risk, but I honestly, at this point, I'm not sure what the federal government can do that would not be criticized in Alberta. By ignoring Alberta, it would also be criticized as well. So I think at this point, Mr. Trudeau has simply written off any kind of hope of having a positive influence on the province, and is, when discussing Alberta politics, is either discussing for a wider, distinct audience, or in this case, simply talking about something that really is in the province's interest. If the province is serious about maintaining an oil and gas industry and going into a low carbon future, then carbon capture technology is going to be a part of that. And it's not a there's no guarantee that it's going to be a feasible technology anytime soon. So effectively, I see this as Trudeau saying, like, if you want to hold on to this sector of your economy in some capacity, this is what you need to do to get there. It's not an unreasonable thing to say, however it is perceived in Alberta.
Yeah, I mean, like, on its face, it's not super unreasonable, but, like, in the context of, hey, we're giving Danielle Smith more ammunition in her upcoming campaign, yeah, maybe not the most politically savvy choice to make.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Smith will find something to complain about. If he didn't talk here, there'd be something else. So,
but, like, you have the choice between accepting that they're going to try and pick a fight with you and giving them something to pick a fight with you about. Like, it's a little different.
Yeah, perhaps. Do you think there's a risk at becoming trigger shy, gun shy? What am I looking to say? About shying away from saying something simply because you're worried about how it will be used by a given Alberta premier?
Well, I mean, like, a lot of politics is deciding when and where to say things, so I don't know, there's an art to it, and I'm not necessarily sure this is a case of of things being done particularly artfully.
That's true. Because there's also a question of whether Danielle Smith is particularly popular in Alberta as well. So he may not be doing the Liberals any favors, but it may not be the worst thing for Rachel Notley to have something reasonable to point to as a way in which the province can actually maintain an oil and gas industry going forward.
Well, Stewart, thanks for joining me tonight and filling in. Normally in the past I've asked you to share your Twitter handle and whatnot if people want to follow you, but gather that's not really the main thing these days. But thanks for coming on, and if you want to plug something, plug it, and if not, well, thanks for filling in.
It's my pleasure. I mean, you can still find me at Twitter. It's hard to quit completely. It is the global town square, so you can still find me at Stewart Prest. You can also find me at Quest University as well. So you're welcome to stop by if you're in the Squamish area. But otherwise, you can find me in the Politico Slack, I'm sure, as well. So there are lots of places you can find me online and in the real world.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And that has been Playtoast. Find links to everything we talked about at playtoast.ca. Support the show and get access to our Slack channel at patreon.com/playtoast. Our intro music credit is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikoff. Playtoast is a production of Legend Boot Media, and editing services are provided by CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Thanks for listening.